And then for everybody, if you just could keep your microphones muted when you don't have questions, just so that we don't get barking dogs, and I apologize if we get any at my end, or such things. And then also, you know, if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, I'll try to watch for that. You're also welcome to enter questions into the chat. And with that, I'll have us get started. So I'm Lori Piper with the Washburn University Bright Center and also the Washburn University Small Business Development Center. Got Carl Klein here, who's our regional director, and Alan Badgley, who's the director of the Kansas Tech Innovation Center. And I want to thank Alan for inviting the Bright Center to be in charge of the fourth Fridays of the Lunch and Learns, which is why we're here today. And then also really like to thank our panelists who are with us, not only locally, but also Howard is joining us from Germany today. So I think our panelists can do a better job of introducing themselves and telling their stories than I can. So again, I want to thank everybody. And if you could maybe, before we get into our questions for the day, if you could each start out by maybe just talking about yourselves for a couple of minutes so that you can let people know about your backgrounds and your companies or organizations that you're representing. I think that would be a very good background for us to have. So maybe Sonia, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Lori. So I am Sonia Hall. I am the president and CEO of BioKansas. We're a nonprofit organization that supports the growth and sustainability of bioscience companies across the state of Kansas, as well as the larger Kansas City, Missouri area. We do that through a variety of different mechanisms in both economic development capacities, workforce development capacities, training and professional development programming, communication mechanisms, and really just engaging a strong network of professionals that span small startup companies all the way to your very large pharmaceutical giants and biotechnology firms, academic institutions, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations as well, which is where we know Lori and Carl from, and also Jeff Shackelford, who I see in the audience, and Sam is one of our members. I myself am a doctor of molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. So if anybody wants to have all of the nerd talk, I'm your go-to kind of person. So I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Sonia. Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I echo the appreciation for the opportunity to be here. I oversee the entrepreneur programming at the Enterprise Center in Johnson County. For those unfamiliar, it's a nonprofit organization also that's been around about 25 years. The primary focus of what we're doing is both deploying capital to seed and angel stage companies in the region. And then I oversee the entrepreneur programming that primarily consists of a MIT-based mentor program that I oversee, and then we help with pitch prep for companies that are going to be looking for capital, help with some sales training, and a number of different things that we do. My background is kind of all over the place in terms of working in startups, both locally and then primarily in the Bay Area. I lived there 14 years. I worked for a number of different startups, a venture capital firm, and then I also owned a Main Street type business in San Francisco for a while. So I'll leave it at that. Look forward to learning more about what you guys are up to.
Who's next?
Howard, why don't you go?
Oh, okay. Lori, you're on mute. That's why I couldn't hear my command orders. And so
Thank you, Howard.
I shall do so. Thank you. Well, Guten Tag from Germany. It's really a pleasure to speak here. My journey was a PhD in microbiology immunology at University of Michigan. I worked on RNA viruses, which was really a good career choice 50 years in advance. And I have, my life's objective is simple, is to find a way to control and cure cancer. And so this half-century adventure has taken me through three startup companies. My first startup company is, we had an epidemic of cancer in San Francisco, and it ended up being called AIDS. And so I created a urine test for HIV. I got FDA approval for it, and we took that company public on NASDAQ and licensed it to Otsuka Pharmaceuticals in the Pacific Rim. Second company, we developed a laboratory-developed test for metastatic cancer to tell you if your therapy is working or not, and that company is being acquired right now. And in March, when I was looking forward to a nice retirement and a Monet garden in the back of my Iowa City home, March 12th, the WHO declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And the phone didn't stop ringing, that they urged me that I had to get back into the game and build a test that would change things. So that's what I have behind me. Is this is the panel we did to see if the prototype would work on dengue fever. And what we can do is you come in, you find out you have COVID-19, but the thing you also need to find out at the exact moment is, do I have a mild case of the disease, or am I going to get severe COVID disease? Severe, go into the hospital immediately, and the milds go home, and you just keep testing yourself for severity. So this has been a long road. I'm glad to lend my experience on what founding companies is, because I can lend it 3 times. And so thank you again, Lori, for letting me speak.
Thank you, Howard. And Sam?
Okay, so thank you, Lori and Carl, for inviting me today. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. I am also an immunologist, and my PhD is in immunology and biochemistry from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. I moved to the States, about 28 years ago. And I went through academia as a scientist, assistant professor initially at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and then at the Penn State University Medical Center in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And then through, I don't know, a stroke of luck or whatever you want to call it, I ended up working at Colgate-Palmolive at Hill's Pet Nutrition on developing nutrigenomics program for them, which I did. And then after that, I decided that I've had enough of academia, I've had enough of industry, and that I wanted to actually branch out on my own. So right now I actually have, I think by last count, 6 companies. All of them in life sciences in one way or another. One of them is a manufacturing company that does pet health supplements for dogs, cats, and horses. I also just started LifeTech Diagnostics, which is a clinical diagnostics lab here in Topeka, and we do COVID testing, other types of testing coming down the pike. I also run Promune, which is a company that has a platform technology for development of vaccines and therapeutics, especially suited for emerging diseases and variants, just like the ones that we're experiencing right now. I also have another startup company, Calidum, which is doing development of radiopharmaceuticals for how to treat cancers. And at this point, I usually in the count, I kind of lose track of what I'm doing. So when people ask me what do I do for a living, I'm basically retired, because I don't do one thing. I do a lot of things, and I enjoy them all. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you guys. Man, what a distinguished bunch of panelists we have here. And I'm going to ask a first difficult question, I think, of you guys, because I'm really asking you to narrow it down to one skill or trait. And that being, what skill or trait really helped you move your company forward after its inception? And this is to each and every one of you, I believe.
Since I'm probably unmuted here, I'll just go and take that. I think for me, it's always been not taking no for an answer. Basically, failure is not an option. It seems to having that continuous drive to make something work. Obviously, you have to know when to give up on something and, you know, kind of cut your losses. But not giving up, I think, is a major trait to that one has to have, in my experience.
Thank you. Howard?
So, you know, looking back now, I think if I had to boil it down to just one simple statement, is know thyself and your objective. And we teach that here. I'm a proud member of a mentor of the Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow, which is a joint venture between the American German Business Club and the American Consulate here. And we basically ask the students, and I continue to ask myself, what's the objective? And so you have to ask yourself, my objective to start up is to make a lot of money, or to be a sports hero, or, you know, whatever your objective is. My objective was to find the cure for cancer. That was pretty much it, and that has been my guiding straight. Now, how does that move my companies forward? Is the company needs to have a product. And so while you're involved, and there's a lot of great academic research going on there, my objective is to have something in the hands of clinicians so they can use it. So clearly it's constantly challenging myself that, am I on track to meet the objective? What do I have to do to, what talent, what resources do I need to be able to get that on the market? And that clarity has been working for me for 50 years.
Yeah, so I would say, and I think we see this reflected in the comments that the other panelists who have been, you know, kind of serial entrepreneurs have shared, is this ability to think strategically, right? So how do you operate within the intersections and find unique and novel opportunities, or realize the distinct potential that your idea or your discovery may have?
All right, Catherine, it's all up to you.
Sure, sorry about that. Yeah, I think for the companies, I don't work so much with biotech companies. So the ones that I work with are much more tech, specifically tech. I see this a lot where they are product people. When you boil it down, they're inventors of products. And at that early stage, they feel that if I build it, they will come mentality a lot. And so I think the two areas that so many people struggle with is learning to do sales, you know, and also understanding their financials. And I think that's a spot where over and over and over, I see people struggling. And so I think if you raise it up a level and say, you have to be willing to learn things that aren't as exciting to you, but that are functional and critical to your business success, as much as how great your product is.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, so Catherine, I think that was a really nice segue into the next question for everybody is, what knowledge, skills, or traits do you think that company founders should try to develop?
I'll just continue on with that. I think I talked about those two skills, but I think in terms of trait, I would say curiosity is such a critical piece. Just especially if you think about the customer side of things. Again, pulling away from that, I built something amazing, so of course people will want to buy it. So frequently people don't bother to go talk to customers and say, what is your problem? You know, what are you struggling with? Where are you spending extra time, extra money? Where are you bleeding losses? And then figuring out if their product solves that problem. And so being curious about who's going to be buying this and what their challenges are, and then figuring out how you fit that. It's so often people go, I have this great thing and you should buy it. And it sort of stops there. So I think that trait of curiosity and willingness to ask questions of the end customer is super critical.
Yeah, I'm going to extend off a little bit of what Catherine's speaking about with that whole, kind of growth mindset. I think one of the critical factors for success is really knowing when you need to reach out for support and admit that you don't know something or have that expertise, and be sure that you're surrounded by the right people to be able to provide that input, right? And fill the gaps that you have as an entrepreneur and a business person.
I'd second that, actually, Sonia. That was what I was going to say, that it's really important to know your limitations. Trying to do everything on your own may look attractive, but it's a recipe for disaster. And knowing when to give up parts to other people and letting go, that's a really important trait. I think certainly for coming from a scientist background, it's really hard sometimes to let go of, you have your pet projects and you've worked on them for life, and but you gotta be able to know when that time is, and then to bring in the right people to help you move the overarching need forward. So I think that definitely is a major trait that has helped me as well.
Howard?
Catherine, you want to go ahead? Or you want me to go ahead? Fine. You're forcing me to look back on 50 years. And so I boiled it down to a few bone mots that I could. I think that if I had to look back at the skills and traits that I use the most, and not in any particular order, I think, Sonia, you may have said it, as business strategy is everything. You really need to have strategic thinking. Playing chess in high school, probably very helpful. But problem solving, how do you learn leadership? You learn leadership by getting out there and trying to lead and do things that work and don't do things that don't work. What's terribly critical for me is investor relations, is to be able to summarize the status of where we are, and with the overarching principle of transparency. If something goes wrong, or you sense something's going wrong, you have to find a way to communicate that to your investors, and then you have to figure out how to solve that problem. So you know what, while this is what makes a good founder, what the problem is you got to get in there and take your lumps. So it took me probably 25 years to learn all these things, but as long as you know that these are the skill sets you are going to have to acquire and learn how to delegate, boy, I couldn't agree more with the other panelists. Then that's it. So those are my high hard ones.
Thank you, Howard. I saw that someone had a hand up with a question. Bobby?
Yeah.
Yes,
Bobby.
hello. I'm Bobby Santa Cruz. I own Bobby's Food Co. I'm a local entrepreneur in the Topeka area, and I have to say that communication skills would have benefited me immensely for me to start my business. And then also to touch upon just real quickly about, like, as a leader, when do you know, or is like quitting a good option to have? Like, a lot of people look at quitting as like a failure or something like that, as a negative thing. But as I've learned, especially with 2020, where everything was turned upside down and we've had to hustle and pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot, what I've learned is that, like, you can't take anything for granted. And if it's not working, go ahead and get rid of it. For you to say no to something, stop your whole forward motion and your process of thinking, and to immediately turn and do something else is way more valuable than holding on to something that more than likely is a negative thing anyway. So that's all I wanted to say. And I'm Bobby, and I'm really enjoying this meeting. So thank you.
Would any of the panelists like to respond?
I had to answer this question last night. I'm missing our Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow meeting, but I gave my 2 cents. Bobby, you couldn't ask a better question. Is when do we stop? I was asked to chime in on what went wrong on the Theranos thing, where, for those of you who know what the Theranos scandal was all about, $1 billion, a $9 billion company, all based on press releases. And the question is the idea was a really good idea, but I don't think that this individual, the founder at the time, really had the loyal advisors that a person needs, that you can sound things out. Because Bobby, I bet you wouldn't make a decision, just wake up in the morning and say, that's it. I'm sure that you would talk to family members, to friends, family that you respect, and bounce the idea of, is this the right way to go? So this is problem solving. It's basically an extension of the scientific method. Is your hypothesis is, should I shut down? The next thing you need to do is find everything you can about that hypothesis. And that means to reach out to people that you trust. And then you have to make the final decision, but you make it on better data. And it's a tough decision to make, but you have to be transparent. If it's not going to make it, you got to be true to yourself first, but get all the right information.
Thank you. So it's a balancing act between knowing when to keep going with a passion and the drive, and using data to inform your decisions about when to pivot, and good counsel.
And Lori, I think it's important too that it's something that you do from the start, right? I think it's kind of related to your long-term vision, ongoing targets and goals towards exit strategies and things like that. If you're in the middle of it and you haven't had that thought already, you miss something 5 steps back, right? I always, when I come in and I take on a new position, I begin my exit from day one, right? And everything that I do is, if I put this in place, what else do I need to do to ensure that we get the right signals and that we're on the right path to close something out, right? Or exit when we need to, and leave the organization or the company in good hands of whomever takes it next.
I think also taking your time to build something. So I'm always very careful not to get ahead of my skis. I always try to move slowly and be very deliberate about how to build a business so that you can grow it. So you build it for growth. I'm one of those people that I've licensed technologies, raised money for other businesses before, but certainly for the businesses that I have currently, 2 of them are, one of them was basically I started from 0 and now is well over $1 million company. And the other one is also self-funded. The idea is that you have to always factor in, how do you grow a business, but not get it too big too soon, because growth has a cost. So you always have to be very careful so that you don't end up killing your own baby, essentially, when it comes to it. That I think is also another trait, is being able to control the growth, control the speed of where you're going, not getting, I mean, I'm looking at Joe and I say, talk to the bank at the right time, and don't go too far with something. Make sure that you have a good foundation to build on. I think that that's critical. And I think a lot of companies that fail in the end, they tend to try to take on too much. And one of my other businesses, I consult with small businesses as well as large businesses. And a lot of the time, the entrepreneurs just want to get the money in, and then they think that by getting the investment in, they're done. That's their deal. But that's only the beginning. And you have to have a real plan as to, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to build it so that you don't get too far ahead and start tripping over yourself? I think that that's also very important.
Can I just add one quick thing? I think kudos to Bobby for making pivots, though I think it's really hard for people to do a lot of the time. And I think as long as it's data driven and you do know the market and you're making a decision based on the market versus sort of flopping around because what you're doing isn't working. It is hard for people to pivot because typically you're very passionate about what you're working on. And so to say, to acknowledge this isn't working and I'm going to shift gears because the data shows that will be more likely to be successful. I think kudos to you on that. It's hard to do.
Some really great replies. And we really want to get back to that funding of the founders, but I've got a question in the chat here from Les, and to those on the panel that were in academia, he wants to know if you were ever approached by an economic development representative about starting your own tech company or recruited to do this. In other words, did anybody seek you out for creating a tech company in academia or at some early stage of your business?
Let me take that one, because when I was in Pennsylvania and I was at the medical center, their local economic development agency did actually come to the medical center. I remember that. And they met with, they had, I think, 1 or 2 meetings, and they met with faculty members at the time who had, who thought that they had good ideas. And then they selected a group of us, and there was then, they put together a kind of an entrepreneur course, if you will. So they actually, I remember, and this, I'm going back well over 20 years here, but they put together a course where we had access to lawyers, to accountants, so that you would understand what is required from a legal perspective for setting up a business, what is the best setup, what is the, okay, so what, financing is one thing, but then there's accounting, the accounting part of it that you also have to understand. Then, other technology partners communicating, that I do remember them doing all these years ago. So I think that is actually, and I know that, the SB, for example, I'm involved with them on several projects as well. They try to do much of that as well. I think that kind of outreach is invaluable for bringing in new technologies and teaching people, okay, what are the steps required to actually get into that, developing a business, if you will.
Anybody else?
We have a lot of activity in the chat. And so Jeff is pointing out that startups never fail. They're experiments in virtually uncontrolled environments, and that founders are testing their hypotheses when they start their companies. So that's a interesting perspective. And then we've got a question for Howard about whether having chess clubs with entrepreneurship classes in high school is a way to develop business skills.
Yes, that's why I'm here today, being espousing my wisdom. It was Mr. Finkel who lived 2 doors down, took me down to the chess club, and then he showed me, took me to his place of business down in the Eastern Market of Detroit, and showed me the basic skills, and then started to say, remember when we started that one move in the chess set? That's the same kinds of ways of developing business strategies. And he went through some of the scenarios that he was thinking about. I think that's the greatest introduction there is. Plus, now it's sexy to be a chess player. So it works out perfect, especially if you're a hot young teenager. So the Queen's Gambit, I think, really has changed everything. I mean, I have these friends of mine, little kids that I'm teaching chess, and they if you create an environment to learn that, you create an environment for problem solving. And so, as the previous comment said, startups never fail. You're just constantly trying to figure out what the next move is. And so now realize that you'll lose your hair along the way, as my colleagues have pointed out, their desire for filters. But the fact is that if you teach kids scenarios early, they start to get it, and they start to see that there is a creative source of energy in here. And learning chess, I just think, is one of the great things that you can do in high school.
Great, thank you. And then another question from Kevin regarding new capital for starting a business. What have been the lessons you've learned, good and bad, contrasting between using outside capital, investor sources, versus organic growth with no outside capital, or just bootstrapping from product revenue sources?
Let me take that one. I would say horses for courses. It's different businesses require different sources of funding and different approaches. For example, with the company that's developing Promium, developing a vaccine, trying to bootstrap it is not an option. We're right now looking to raise $5 million, at least $2 million to do a phase 1 clinical trial. It's very hard to bootstrap your way through that, especially if you want to get to market without any reasonable time frame. But on the other hand, for example, my Bimini company, which is a manufacturing company, that was built brick by brick, and I started it from my computer, where I actually worked with co-packers. So I didn't own anything apart from the know-how at the time. And then I moved from the know-how to then started doing some of this stuff in my basement. And now I'm sitting in my office in a 12,000 square foot facility here in Topeka, where we have an honest to God brick and mortar shop making stuff and employees and everything. So that business literally started from nothing. But it like I said, different businesses will require different sources, and you have to be open to all of them.
Would anybody else like to comment on that also?
Yeah, I would say, I would agree with that. And I would also say kind of the answer, it depends, fits in here in many ways. I think it always starts with what's your objective. Like, do you want to be acquired? Do you want to, is this a lifestyle business? What is your goal as a founder? And then what industry are you in? And I think for especially like tech companies, manufacturing companies, this would be somewhat true, I believe as well, is that early money, if you start using other people's money, is very expensive. And so thinking about, again, what is your objective and what's your goal, you have to exchange something for that money when you take it. So if you can bootstrap, if you can figure out how to get it further down the pike, the money that you take from other people will be cheaper for you in the long run. And it may, at the earliest stages, might not even be an option to use other people's money in terms of investor money. So you maybe will have to come up with a way to use your own money. So I think, like in so many things related to entrepreneurship, it depends is kind of where it starts. What your objective is, step one. What industry you're in, as Sam said, is really important. And then getting as far down that pipe, which goes back to understanding your customer needs, understanding how to be your own salesperson for a while, understanding how to pivot if you need to. All of those come into play to get you further down the pike with the money that you have, so that you can get the next money to get you to the next milestone as cheaply as possible.
Thank you, Catherine. We've got a couple of more questions in the chat, but while we're on the topic of funding, I'd like to tie that back to founder traits and thinking about what investors look for in companies. How important is the founder?
Critical.
Yeah.
So when investors are looking at a company's founder, what are things that they look for? Howard?
I have to chime in here. I'm trying to, I have a inquiry into the Smithsonian to find out if I have set the record for being a founder who's been fired from 2 companies 7 times. And it's like the movie, thank God there's a bunch of old timers on here. It's like the movie Silver Streak, where Gene Wilder is constantly being thrown off the train and has to figure out how to get back on again. I finally developed the following theory. And quite frankly, my third company is the board of directors is my brother and I. You're going to get common shares of stock and you're going to like it. And the reason why is that I can tell you that whenever the founder loses the support of his or her board of directors, it's over. It's just simply over. The founder is everything. The founder was the one who came up with the idea. The founder was the one who passionately presented the business plan to the investors. The investors came in. Catherine, you couldn't be more right. One of the other things that one has to be very cognizant of is where you are and whether you're in the family and friends, the seed state. I've come to reevaluate what angel investors means. I didn't realize that a lot of angel investors are actually angels that wait till you die before they come and visit you. And so you really kind of have to summarize what funding do I really have access to. And but I must tell you, the founder is everything. Is once they lose confidence, it's over. It's basically a dying whale if it got to any size, or a dying minnow, but it will die. And so you really that's why I get back to investor relations. You really have to make sure everybody knows what's going on and what needs to be adjusted to move forward. And then my last comment is not only other people's money, but I now have the luxury. I mean, geez, I'm sitting here on Frankfurt drinking behind my camera because I use other people's garages. And so, you know, when you start up a company, you don't have to do it in your garage, use somebody else's garage. It may be a little bit more expensive, but you don't have the capital expenses that it requires to play. So that's my 2 cents. Founders are everything. Thank you.
So maybe somebody could elaborate on that. Okay, so founders are everything. Founders are important. What's important about the founder? Like what are the attributes that investors look for in the founders?
I believe your backstory and your story is the most vital and important factor when you're trying to go after funding, especially when you come from a different type of background. I'm a blue collar guy. I have a GED. I've built everything I have from absolutely nothing, to where the banks don't really like me, even though once they see my tax return, you know, my tax statements and all that, they start to love me, especially over the longevity of my business now. So with that being said, on Monday, I'm actually about to go speak. I'm going to go after my first real money as an from an investor, because I have a clear goal. I have a definite plan, and I'm also very comfortable where I'm at inside my business. With that being said, that's really all I wanted to say. And I've learned a lot from this already. Thank you guys for all your experience.
I think one of the, really key things is that they have that vision, right? They're the passion and they're the drive behind, getting from where you are to where you want to be, whether that be where you want to be financially or where you want to be within the development of that company. Without that driving force, momentum, and continual inspiration, that company is static.
Yeah, and I would say I would agree with the passion piece of it, and that shows up in so many ways. You're trying to attract talent to a company that doesn't have history, and you probably can't afford to pay them very much. You're trying to sell customers on a new idea that doesn't currently exist in the market from a company that doesn't have a reputation, and you're wanting them to give you actual money for that. You're, trying to sell investors on the idea that the market has a problem that you have a solution for, and that you need their money for that if that's the route you're going. So much of that comes back to you as an individual being able to sell that. And I would say, when I worked in Silicon Valley at a venture firm, it was very common in those days, like no one got to stay the CEO with the group that we worked with. Like the first thing they did when they gave you money is they replaced you. And because the idea is that typically, and this was all tech at the time, but the idea is that tech people are always product people. They're always selling the sexiness of the product, but they rarely ever have business skills enough to scale their business. And so when I give you my money, I need you to have business skills. And so I'm going to replace you. That was sort of the mentality there. That's not so much the mentality in the Midwest, that here they want you to have the business skills, and they'll, put services and support around you to try to help you get there if you're not there. I kind of call it my Midwest nice issue, which is both good and bad. But I think it's so critical because in the beginning you're selling the sizzle, and so no one knows the sizzle as much as the person who had the idea.
I have a story about a founder who's also called Sam. He started Promune back in 2011. For many years, as a scientist, he tried to sell the idea, which the platform is an extremely versatile platform for developing these vaccines and therapeutics. And he failed. And I happened to meet him. I was on the panel at the Animal Health Investment Forum in Kansas City. I was on the judging panel. And he was actually and I was also on the selection committee, and he was one of the people that came through and presented. And I remember I actually completely panned him for the fact that he had not thought out the business. He thought out the science, and he's a brilliant scientist, but never actually got past that to doing the business. It just so happened that I actually picked up the phone and called him about 1.5 years later, because I usually do that to see where those people, what happened to them. So one thing led to another. He hired me to become his CEO. He actually, and that was the trait that I want to bring forward here. He decided at that point, after speaking with me and it took us about 3 or 4 hours of talking over a period of time, that I convinced him that, look, Sam, you have a great idea, but you suck at business. And you need to know that in order for you to move this forward. So then he hired me. The first thing that I did was I actually hired, I put a board together, a board of directors for the company. So then the company actually had some stewardship. It just so happened that Sam passed away about 2 years ago. And the company continues now because he had the foresight at the time to agree that he, as a scientist, can't do it. And he knows now that to bring in the business, and the business Promune continues. I'm running it as president and CEO of the company, but I have a board who is helping me raise money. They contribute their own money as well to pushing the business forward, and that business will continue. And I think it will be successful because of that one decision that he made back in 2015 to stop being everything and let people help him move it forward. So I kind of, that is, it's such an important thing to be able to let go of things that you hold very dearly to your heart. And want to see being successful.
So, Sam, I think that's a great pathway into some of the earlier comments that we heard that there are no failures. So I would really beg the question is, what are some other ways that you recover from failure? Because nobody has 100% successes, right? So how do you recover from some of those failures that occur out there?
And I'll do this very short interjection here. When I first started Bimini, I tried to be a brand company. So I was making a branded product through co-packers and trying to sell it to distributors, pet shops, you name it, vets. I realized that so what was happening is I was trying to do that, and I am a scientist. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a seller, and I was literally spending 75% of my time traveling, trying to figure out how to sell these things, never ever being able to sell enough to even cover the costs of traveling, notwithstanding the fact that I had 4 small kids and I wasn't seeing them because I was at a Marriott 6 months out of the year. So I remember coming back from Denver, a trip to Denver, after I had just literally, I was there for 3 days. I managed to sell about $5,000 worth of product. I came back and I did the calculation of how much did it cost me? How much did that trip cost me? And I calculated everything, not just the travel costs, but the time, etc. And how much was it bringing in? And I realized at that point that trying to do this is insane. So that was the moment that I decided, okay, I'm going to stick to what I know best. I know how to make stuff. And I started then manufacturing. I started becoming the guy who would design the product, who would make the product and let somebody else sell it. So we are a private label manufacturer, and we make custom products and private label products for others to sell. Since I made that decision, the business has literally gone up like that. And that decision to change from a branded product company to a manufacturer for other brands was absolutely critical to the success of the company. It's the same company.
I think that on the failure path, I think the number one thing that I see people do well or fail well is that they're humble about it. So they're looking for the lesson. So they will, they'll talk to the people that didn't want to buy their product, or people that didn't want to give them more money, or whatever the fail points they can find, and ask, like, why? What's your perspective on how this failed, or what I did wrong? And you have to have a certain level of ego to start a company. It's a hard thing to do, and so that's kind of to take it and turn it around and say, I'm going to ask you to tell me what I did wrong, is a really hard thing for people to do. But I think that's one of the most critical things that you can do, so that when you start the next thing, and most people will, and I think a lot of the points at which people fail is that they're inventors versus business people. And so learning that also is a really important lesson, and maybe that's what you'll pull from that. But I think just being humble and letting people tell you the honest reason why, because sometimes you can't see it.
Thank you. So I love a comment from Les on that, which is maybe we need to have a seminar on how to fail well. Let's see. Okay, a question from Kevin for each of the panelists. As you have founded companies and grown them, what's your plan on recruiting talent as you grow your employee base? Where do you look for workforce talent, and what are some of the limitations you've faced?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you where my philosophy has now gone to is I was fortunate that when you're in the San Francisco Bay Area and it's the 80s, the number one hazard is tripping over all the money that's available. And so it was nothing but resources everywhere. I mean, I would snap a finger if I needed a lab technician that could do this, that, and the other. There was just available. So, that's why the Bay Area became, the center of the beginning of the computer technology and biotechnology, all these things, because you had the perfect storm, and they did that by design. You had major universities, Berkeley, UCSF, Stanford, all in one area. You had lots of money on Sand Hill Road. You had all the experience you needed to do it. What I do now is I sit back and I say, while we're having problems with social media and the internet and misinformation, it still works. And so what happens for me is if you go to my website and say, I love what you're doing and I want to find a way to work with you, I don't recruit anymore. People just come to me. So it got to a point where I was just beneficially in the Bay Area. Now I'm in Iowa. I came up to Iowa 35 years ago because they promised to build the state more into a technology state and they did it. So now that I've come back, I don't have the same access to resources that I had in the San Francisco Bay Area. But now some of your businesses are agriculture related, what have you. You have the talent. It's out here. So you got to use your network. But I got to tell you something that I have looked at all the social media, and the one that works for me the most is LinkedIn. I've done licensing deals with big companies because I could find somebody who's in another company through LinkedIn and work my way through the system. And you can also find people that are qualified. Indeed's a very good recruiting service that I use also. So there's all these tools that are out there that you have to decide on yourself which one works the best. Try them all out. They're not that expensive, and you find really good people. And so the benefit of the internet, you should use it to your advantage and let people know what you want and let them know you're looking for people. And I think it's a whole new world. And I just think things are going to move a lot faster because there is a lot of good to the internet. And that's what I'm focused on.
Thank you. So that connects well with a question that came up in the chat earlier, which was whether there are any economic incentives to recruit employees and companies from California to the Midwest and to Kansas.
They come home. They all come home to roost. You can go out and make your fortune, learn how to surf, and become a rap star. But at the end of the day, you got to come home. And so everybody I work with that is probably the best resource I ever had, all have come back to Iowa. I came back to Iowa. And so the fact is that they self-recruit. And so now, do you have to bring them in from California and other places? That's a tough decision. I had to tell my brother, who lived 35 years in San Jose, California, to move back to Iowa and learn Spanish words like derecho and Polar Express, freezing cold, and the like. And so the thing that did it was I waited till the last California fire bursted and the whole place was smoke filled. And then that's when you recruit from California, right after an earthquake, during a fire from all these space lasers they're building in Israel. And that's how is the best way, I think, to recruit. My 2 cents.
Thank you. I think this is probably a topic that's important to Sonia also.
Yeah. So for me, I feel like a lot of the recruitment, if you're talking about recruiting talent that's in Kansas, and, our area of focus is really the biosciences sector, there's a real shortage of skilled talent in this area. And so sometimes I think that we have to actually step back and say, okay, I can teach the skills, but what I need is to find that value construct that this individual has that aligns with my organization, right? So what is it about them as an individual? How do they see themselves fitting in? What are the additional traits that they bring to the table that can help your organization succeed? It's not always the most technically trained person, right? I think there's also a lot of bias that's set up in the system that tend to lead us towards the person who has that Ivy League education. But that's not always the best cultural fit for our organizations either, right? And so if we start to shift our way of thinking, it opens up the door of possibilities a little bit differently. And then we as leaders of organizations have to be willing to provide the mentoring, training, and support to ensure that that person succeeds and helps us meet our mission.
Yeah, I think so. I have the 2 companies that I have that have employees now. One of them is a manufacturing company, and that company is in exactly the right spot in the world to do what it's doing. It's a pet health supplement manufacturing company, and this area is brimming with the right talent for that kind of a company, both in manufacturing, food science, all of that. When it came to LifeTech, which is a clinical diagnostics company, hopefully with a future iteration of developing diagnostic tests, that was a totally different story. It was easy enough to recruit technicians. We have Washburn University here in Topeka, and I was lucky enough to, and it wasn't through anything that I did. It was somebody who went to the bank and found this new graduate of biology from Washburn University as a bank teller. And because this person was wearing scrubs, he asked her, do you know anybody who is recruiting for like a biologist? So I ended up bringing this guy in as our technician. When it came to actually recruiting a technical supervisor, which is required for a clinical lab, it was much harder. And we were, for a good 2 or 3 months, really kind of reaching the stage where I thought, uh-oh, I'm going to have to serve in that role. And these days, I really don't want to do anything. But we lucked out in that we found somebody who lives in Topeka, who actually was traveling to the other side of Kansas City to work in a lab out there. And it was, again, by chance. I think, to second what Sonia was saying, recruiting for that type of a position here in the Midwest, and Howard may have other ideas on this, but is certainly harder than recruiting for a manufacturing business. So I think while we have the infrastructure and we have the talent here for like something in manufacturing, when it comes to something that is R&D based or more biomedical, it becomes really hard to find the right talent in this area.
So we had talked a little bit earlier about how important the founder is to investors. That makes me ask, how important is the founder to these really key employees that you're trying to recruit?
Also really important, because I think, again, you're asking people to come work for you, and you have no track record. You're doing something new. You have a very short time frame to get to market a lot of times, or at least an accelerated time frame, and you have to lay the groundwork for like, how are we going to get there? And so it all comes back again to and that's part of finding the right talent. If you hire the wrong people, I see this a lot in tech companies, again, which is kind of the bulk of my experience, where they'll hire somebody that's a marketing person but they think they're a salesperson, because sales and marketing are always said together. And then they end up spending a lot of time and money not getting anywhere, and no deals happen. So again, if that founder is not sophisticated to recognize that, they're hurting themselves. So there's a lot of ways where the staff, both in recruiting, managing, getting the vision across, all comes back to that founder again, and their ability to understand the business, how to motivate, how to work the money where it works out, because you have limited resources. All of that is so critical.
Thank you. So we have a number of students from Washburn University here who are studying entrepreneurship, and we also have I know people who are attending today who have started tech companies or are interested in starting tech companies. So what advice do you have for them?
Go do it.
Jump in. I think finding mentors is super important. Always be learning is super important. Read books, talk to people who've done it, find people who failed doing similar things, talk to the people that didn't make it just as importantly. Getting out in the community, meeting people. I think especially if you, going back to your earlier point, if you think raising capital from investors is the path you're going to take, you can't just call those people and say, hey, I'm ready for you to give me money now. They have to be in your network, and you have to start that early. And so figure out what the community events are that are taking place and attend those and meet people. Figure out how to explain your business very succinctly, very clearly. always be open to learning that what you're planning on doing maybe needs to tweak some way. So I think you can't stay in your garage and be building something and then pop up and go, okay, I'm ready for you to, throw all these resources at me. It's not going to work that way. So curiosity, access, building your network, asking questions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the fact is, today's entrepreneurs have something that we didn't have, and that's lots and lots of videos on lots and lots of entrepreneurs that have made it, that haven't. It's required reading to read Steve Jobs' biography. It's required to see this. But now go on YouTube and find the guys and gals that failed and listen to them. The world is yours. YouTube alone. If I had to say the one thing I like, it's just finding life stories on YouTube that people have shared that are really good, and find out if people's what they did, stumbling blocks wise. And the other thing is about leadership. The tough part is you can't teach leadership. You have to learn it. And so you have to put yourself in a situation where the dynamics. The fastest way I learned leadership was realizing that I just got my PhD and now I'm making half the amount of money as a postdoc, but at least it was all tax-free. I never understood that pitch. But what was told to me was, stop bothering me, get a job as a waiter. Simply game-changing life experience. You know why? You live by your wits. Because if you go by a table and you annoy them, you're not going to get a tip. If you go by a table and you read the table and you read people's faces and you read people's moods and things like that, you can make a good living in the waiter business, especially if you end up being the maitre d' of a five-star restaurant. That'll be on the next discussion we have. So anyway, the YouTube, the Vimeo, what's out there is really spectacular. Learn from other people's mistakes. They're out there, they're great stories, and start at where every entrepreneur should start, and that's Steve Jobs' biography. Like him or hate him, he did what he did.
Yeah, and Lori, I think I want to reinforce some of the things that Catherine said. Surround yourself by good people, right? Become part of the critical network. If there are people that are in the position that you want your company to be in, or doing the things that are similar to what you want your company to be doing, integrate yourself into those groups. I think also listen just as much as you talk is a critical thing, right? You have to be able to talk about your business, but listening to those stories and those lessons that other people have to tell is critically important. And never forgetting, and I think this goes a little bit to one of the things that Bobby alluded to, you get to define success at each step, right? And success can be redefined over and over and over again as you make steps towards your accomplishments. But what somebody else predetermines as being necessary for success isn't always accurate. And so push back against those preconceived notions of what you need to be able to succeed.
I'll add one last thing to all of the great comments is, don't let the fear of failure stop you from doing it. I think a lot of people feel that if they fail, somehow the earth is going to collapse on itself. It really doesn't. I think when you fail, and if you're tenacious enough, you will find another way of making it work. And I think that is, I see it in a lot of my family members, extended family members who have they want to be business people, they want to start businesses, but they can't give up the paycheck. They can't give up the safety of having health insurance. My life was made easy for me. I got fired from my job. And I decided that I'm not going to work for anybody else, ever. And I created my own destiny. Now I own my life. Nobody could tell me what to do. I can come and go as I please. I can not work, or I can work, or do whatever I want. And by the way, we were very close to bankruptcy. In fact, I mean, I say it now to my wife, but at the time I didn't dare ever say it to her because she would probably have jumped off a cliff. So don't let the fear of failing and doing something that you want to do stop you from exploring it. And I feel that a lot of people have that fear, and I think if you can rationalize it somehow, it just will open so many doors, and you will then know what you can and can't do.
Cultivate the beginner's mind every day.
So Sonia and I were talking the other morning, and we were talking about this discussion today and thinking about traits that we would look for in company founders. And the conversation turned to, what are the things that we recommend that company founders learn how to let go of in themselves? So Sam, something that you talked about is, people having to learn that they sometimes need to give up a certain amount of control, or, let somebody else take over a certain part of the business. But as you think about, traits that people need to develop and traits that they need to let go of, what might be some traits that people need to let go of in the process of becoming that great company founder?
There are so many that I could mention. I'm trying to think of maybe one.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, so I'll send that to the whole panel.
Yeah, if anybody else wants to chime in while I think of the one.
Okay, Howard's got one.
Yeah, there you go.
You know what, you have to it's a circumlocation. You have to know where you are in the life of your company. I'll give you a real life example. My first company got started, it was like Woody Allen's Sleeper, where he gets the nose of the dictator and he's going to clone the nose. And so we went out and hired 30 people. We had an idea, and a month later we hired 30 people. And the problem was I didn't have the experience to know we're not there. So you have to learn to give up things when it's time to give it up.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that it's just, whether it's funding, whether, where am I? Am I ready for venture capitalists, or am I still in the friends and family stage? The other thing is, where am I in the product development stage? And do I need a CEO right now? What do you need a CEO for? Well, you have to have the list of functions that's going to be required. So the most important trait is to know where you are in the woods, and make sure that you always have a true north star and you keep following it. But I'll tell you, we've hired too many people too early and went through the cash flow and didn't have the kinds of dynamics you need for people to all be hitting on the same pistons to grow together when you bring people in too early. So know where you are in the status of your company, and make sure you think through that when you do give up things that you need to give up sales. If you're the founder, you may have to give up sales and marketing to somebody, but give that up when you have something to sell, and use consultants until you get to that point. So that's my trait.
Actually, that actually brought up the example that I wanted to give is when Bimini started, it was supposed to be, we were supposed to make diagnostic devices. That's what Bimini was supposed to be. I found out very quickly that it will take me about $3 or $4 million just to get to a prototype. And I wasn't really prepared to do that. So I thought, well, let's do something else, generate a revenue stream, and then eventually maybe I'll get to doing diagnostics, but let me give up on it right now and do something that I think I can do. So that's how Bimini became a pet supplements business, which is where, how do these things meet in the middle? Don't ask me. But in any case, now back in, so Bimini, what was it, like, let's say 2012, 2013, we started with the whole pet supplements. In 2020, I started LifeTech Diagnostics, which is the diagnostics company that I wanted to start back in 2012. So I think what Howard said is exactly right. Is you gotta know when the timing is for what portion of the business to go with as well. And sometimes it's a very apparent, and sometimes you just have to find these things out.
I would add also, if
Go
I
ahead.
can, okay, I was gonna say, sorry about that. I would say discipline is a really critical thing. And I think, again, I primarily interface with technology startups. But I think what I see so often is they're trying to boil the ocean. Their idea, every customer, potential customer they talk to, this idea could be this for that person, and this for this other market, and this for this other market. And so it's kind of like this breathless, oh yeah, and pretty soon their resources are stretched super thin, and they're trying to do a little bit in a lot of places. And what we spend a lot of time doing is going, you got to focus, like pick one and try to go deep enough in that one so that you can prove some success, and then add other verticals or other markets or other products as that makes sense from a business perspective. But don't try to be all things to all people, and don't try to serve all people right out of the gate, because you're going to run out of money before you get any traction. And without traction, you're not going to get more money. So I would say discipline is a critical.
Yeah, and for me, a trait that they need to let go of is independence. I think you need to know your limits and reach out to community-based resources like what you have at the SBDC, right? And what organizations like BioKansas have. You don't have to know how to do everything. So if you give up a little bit of that independence and thinking you have to carry that burden by yourself and rely on the community resources around you, you can succeed a lot more gracefully and seamlessly.
Well, thank you. That's really been some great advice today. Do you have any concluding thoughts or last words of wisdom that you would like to share before we wrap up?
I think what Sam did, what he said earlier, just get out there and do it.
Just do it. Don't let fear stop you.
You guys have been absolutely fantastic. What a huge wealth of knowledge here today. And I think it just goes to show that all of us are smarter than one of us. So great shares. Lori's been great in putting this together for everybody. And I appreciate all of her hard work, and hope you'll come back to join us again sometime. Lori, do you have anything else?
I want to thank our panelists, because something that that our team recognizes is that it's important for us to hear company founders' stories and to listen to businesses, as well as to work with other resources. So we really appreciate you sharing your experience with us, and also with the other people who have attended today, and given your time, and the attendees giving their time so that we could all have this conversation. And I certainly have a lot to think about. And what I'd like to do after something like this is then go and write, because that's how I process information, is I write about it. And so hopefully I'll have something that I can share with you. But I'm just so impressed with all of the things that all of you are doing, and where you're going, and where you've been, and thank you for sharing that with us today. And please let me and Carl and Alan know if there's anything that we can do for you.
You guys.
And I just shout out, I realized that I was giving you my experience. It's just been a pleasure and a success working with the SBDC, Lori and Paul Heath, and all the individuals. I had no idea how many resources were available to me in the Iowa area, in this area, chats like this. So one thing to put in your chat is when you have an idea, don't be afraid to go visit your local SBDC, because it's been a hell of a ride. Your advice and just telling us what's out there and available, I would have never found it by myself. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, well, we'll stay on for a little bit. I know Sonia has to run, but Carl and I and Alan will stay on for a little bit if anybody wants to chat with us. And if anybody needs to run, we appreciate what people's schedules are like also. So thank you again, everybody.
Great.
And
Thank
Laurie,
you.
just very quickly, I want to thank your panel. You guys did a fantastic job and great information. I'm the one who's supposed to set up the poll, so I sent out a poll asking everyone to give us their feedback. We'll record that. Super kudos to Carl and Laurie. Our tech program could not grow without scaling this. And they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm so proud of what they're doing from the bottom of my heart. And for you guys for coming and doing what you're doing today. Love what you said. I've taken a ton of notes. We want to keep this information going. Please, some of you that talked about mentoring, please stay part of the Bright Center, part of the SBDC mentoring. Get involved, send others to us where we can continue this. Great panel today, folks. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Auf Wiedersehen.
Go have a drink, have a beer.
Or that Chateau Margaux.
Chateau Margaux, exactly.
Very
Yeah,
inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenna. Jeff, thanks for being here today and connecting us with Catherine.
Yes.
No problem. I was just thrilled to hear her genius come out on the panel. So
Yeah,
glad she could be
she
with
did
you.
great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed
Right.
sitting in. So I'm sure we'll continue discussions on some other things we can do together.
Some
Yeah,
great
we look
comments.
forward
too,
to it.
Jeff. Thanks.
Okay, get in the poll. There. If you guys, I don't know if you can see the results, show you the poll. It was very good today. I really was, that was good stuff.
Good. I'm glad you liked it, Alan.
I really did. I thought at first it was going to stay on the platitude level. And I was a little concerned with that.